Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistanomy. Today I have with me Ariba Shahid. She's a business and economic journalist at Profit by Pakistan today. And we're recording this on 14th August and I think our colors match because I'm wearing a kind of a green, a faded green. Thoda dhoop mein jo hai wo fade ho gaya hai, aur Ariba is representing the minority. So Ariba, welcome to Pakistanomy.
Thank you for having me and not telling me this is going to be a video thing.
Yeah, I assumed that people by now know, at least I know you tune in every once in a while, but I guess you were only a podcast listener, so you did not realize that we do videos as well. So my apologies for that, but let's jump in. Let's jump in. And 2 months ago, you wrote an article about the budget and the budget of L's explained. Pehle to ye bataएं कि ये editor, how did the editor approve this headline? And yeah, let's start with that.
It's interesting. So Dr. Abid Suleri, unka jo quote tha, he was like, usually the governments work on a budget of D's, but this time they came up with budget of L. And I was like, yeah, I can't let this go. I honestly can't let this go. It's the perfect headline. So I posted as the headline, and the web desk guy goes like, Ariba, are you sure? Like, dude, I don't want to get fired. And I'm like, yeah, kar do, agar daan padegi to bolo na, Ariba ne bola.
You can apologize later.
Yeah, no, and website pe pehle lagta hai na, and then later on in the news, and then you can change the headline in like 2 seconds. So later on, when I saw the website, I saw that it was there. Then later on, my boss like put it up into the featured area because he knew that people were reading it. And apparently, I did not get in trouble. Or isse pehle, one time I wrote, WTI now cheaper than a plate of biryani. तो ये थोड़ा सा मसला मेरे साथ है.
मतलब लोग तेल पीना शुरू कर दें और बिरयानी जो है वो साइट पे करते हैं.
मतलब I like how funny art headlines are allowed.
But I like the humor. I think it makes it in a way also more accessible, right? It makes the content more accessible.
You need to get your mind out of the gutter because L stands for lives, livelihood, lockdown, and locus. Or I have no idea what else it stands for.
वो क्लिक करने के बाद ही पता चलेगा ना कि किस बारे में बात हो रही है. But I think the humor is one thing I appreciate about sort of you being on Twitter as well as the content that you put out, because it is more accessible that way. It is less sort of technical in nature, and उससे जो है काफी ज्यादा लोग जो जिनको ज्यादा समझ भी ना हो या they're intimidated by reading too much about the economy, I think it is something they can click on and catch up on. So it's good that way.
And anyone that knows me knows that I can't stay serious. And that even during work meetings, I'm always laughing on call. So like the articles mein nazar aa hi jata hoga, I'm hoping.
आर्टिकल से याद आया और यू बीइंग फनी से याद आया कि कुछ दिन पहले आप थोड़ा ज़्यादा फनी हो रही थी विद द मैप्स एंड आपने एक तस्वीर लगाई थी विद पाकिस्तान सरेंडरिंग ढाका. उसके बाद जो हुआ वो ज़रा शेयर करें कि you got a lot of trolling done, and I think trolling is in the news these days because of the statement that came out and the follow-up statements or tweets that came out from the PTI. तो ये बताएं कि आप तो फनी हो रही थी लेकिन उसका फनी होना जरा महंगा पड़ गया था आपको.
Okay, so I was trying to make a point in a funny way. It was more like how pehle map is तरह से change हुआ था for the worse, right? And right now हमने map बना दिया, हुआ या नहीं हुआ, we changed it, and how we're now playing using narratives, all right? Because wars are now like, you can see Trump fighting with China over Twitter. So wars are now fought over narratives, and that is something that I feel that Pakistan was trying to do. But like, I may have misphrased it, but the point stands that after that I received a lot of trolling. People call me an Indian agent. People send me videos of Indian journalists talking about how Pakistani journalists are unhappy with Pakistan and the army. I love Pak army. But what I'm trying to say is, alongside that, there were some tweets saying I should die, some tweets using my face and saying, stuff like they used my picture as well and started swearing at me. So yeah, that is trolling. But to be very honest, it's not the first time, and I think it's not the last time. Some of it has been extreme. Some of it has been okay. So the extreme.
So do you think Is that something that comes with the territory, or is it that you've sort of grown a thicker skin with it? But because I've seen stuff that is truly toxic, and
It
people
is.
do it a lot of times to shut you down, and it is coordinated at times, or
It is.
काफी organized होता है. So, what is it like being a female journalist in Pakistan, especially talking about the economy? Because आजकल फोकस वैसे ही जो है रूलिंग पार्टी का या गवर्नमेंट का इकोनॉमी पर है, तो आप अगर थोड़ी सी करेक्शन करने लग जाएं, जैसे परसों मैं कर रहा था ऑन द बीआरटी, मैंने कहा अच्छा प्रोजेक्ट है, आई एम हैप्पी फॉर द पीपल ऑफ पेशावर, आई ग्रो अप इन कराची अभी भी जाता हूँ, यू लिव देयर इज नो पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट, सो आई एम एक्चुअली जेलस ऑफ पेशावर एंड कूडोज
Exactly.
टू द
मेरा भी
पीटीआई
दिल चाह रहा
गवर्नमेंट.
था.
हाँ,
Yeah.
लेकिन मैंने कहा भाई डिलेड है प्रोजेक्ट और सब्सिडी है, तो
Which it is.
सब्सिडी तो हर चीज को दी जाती है, बट देयर वाज सो मच trolling happening to silence anyone who was pointing out the facts.
I feel that there is a thing where WhatsApp groups जो हैं, they're not used for creative or good discourse. They're more used like, oh, इस बंदे ने ये tweet किया, आओ इसकी लेते हैं सब. So that is something that is happening a lot. Uh, when writing an article, I usually try, since I'm not an op-ed writer, I'm a journalist, right? So I try to taking both sides. But as far as my articles are concerned, sometimes, yes, I get a lot of trolling, sometimes from the opposition party as well. Like one time I wrote an article saying that coronavirus is not as deadly for Pakistan's economy as one would think. And some guy in the comment section is like, I hope your family gets COVID. And I'm like,
oh wow.
Yeah. So
do you
as
read
far
comments on your stories
कभी
often?
मजा आता है.
अच्छा.
अच्छे वाले नहीं छोड़ते ना लोग, मतलब आप भी ट्रोल करो तो खुल के करो ना.
No, that's true. Speaking of like the economy at COVID, 2 महीने पहले, again going back to the article you wrote, we were talking about around that time as well, and the budget was a disappointment. I think we can all
It
agree
was
on that.
underwhelming.
It was underwhelming. The government also did not decide to defend itself in that budget. The targets are unrealistic, etc. But fast forward 2 months, and fertilizer
We
sales are
never
up,
knew we'd
cement
be
is
here.
up, सब कुछ best हो गया है. तो are we out of the woods? And what's your take on what's going on with the economy now that a few months have passed and we're coming towards the end of the summer?
I don't really think that we were ever really in the woods. We never really studied COVID the way we should have. The minute we found out that ek do cases aa gaye, the minute we found out few people are dying, we were like doom and gloom, which is the natural response. All right. When you hear about a disease that has taken the world captive, आप बोलोगे हम तो गरीब मुल्क हैं, हमारे साथ बहुत बड़ा होने वाला है. So we start prepared for the worst. In fact, the COVID package that the government announced, I'm not going to say it was bad, but I'm also going to say it was a little misleading. All right. But regardless of that, it got the job done by keeping business, confidence intact. So even though I think there's a profit article by our managing editor Farooq Timizi about how we can afford a lockdown, where he says it's not a 1.2 trillion package. I think it's 755 billion package, because he says that the fuel subsidies announced weren't really subsidies, and he says that the wheat procurement is done every year, and he says that tax rebates are basically, you got to do them. So he writes down things that are not supposed to be part of the package but are part of the package. But at the same time, the government played smart in the way that it played with minds, and that way you kept your business sentiment intact to an extent. So while the stock market did collapse in line with regional expectations, it did also recover. So I'm not saying the stock market is the economy, because मुझे इस पे भी trolling बहुत
हाँ,
मिली
नहीं,
है.
उस पे मैं पूछने वाला था कि stock market particularly in Pakistan is not the economy. But उससे पहले I'll add one point that I agree with you that the government did keep the confidence up and rolled out even the 1.2 trillion. If you cut it down, as Farooq did, into 750 billion, the state bank then also followed through, right? So it was a collaborative monetary and fiscal stimulus, जो कि state bank ने भी थोड़ा सा जो है वो inject
So
किया.
as far as the state bank is concerned, usually you would think that the state bank would only, slash interest rates, blah blah blah, right? But the state bank went beyond that. And the thing that I like about the state bank and what it did this time is उन लोगों ने COVID का एक page बनाया है अपनी website पे where you can actually go and see what policies the state bank has brought in because of COVID. And not just that, one can actually say that जो काम हम इतने सालों में नहीं कर पाए, COVID is actually accelerating the pace with which foreign money can come in, investment, blah blah blah, technical, digital. It's been able to digitalize Pakistan way faster than what track we were on. So the state bank, yes, I would say the state bank has played a really smart role, and it's not just slashing interest rates because obviously there's a limit to how low you can go, considering fundamentals, considering the IMF policies, things like that.
And
But
they
the
will be
state,
tested now, right? Because inflation
yeah,
is still persistently high, and food
yeah.
inflation is inching up, and oil thoda
Again,
bhi aur increase hoga.
I find it weird to I find one thing weird is when the state bank was hiking the policy rate, they said they were doing it to track down inflation. One question I always have is कि ये जो inflation आप track down कर रहे थे, those were not because of the demand side factors. It was mostly because of supply
Cost push.
factors, cost push inflation exactly. So वो उल्टा और price वो policy rate hike से in a way it could rise, right? So that was something I had some adversities with, but like अभी जो 7% है, in my opinion, I think it's good enough.
And I think would carry trade. I mean, the state bank wouldn't say it openly why they were increasing rates, but मेरे नज़दीक, and I would love your thoughts on this as well. दो वजूहत थी उसकी. एक ये था कि उन्होंने IMF से agreement करना था. IMF was saying you have to jack up rates, and the IMF was saying that, and state bank also played along with it. Was that जब आप jack up करेंगे तो आप carry trade profitable बना देंगे, and that hot money will flow in to beef up your reserves, which were needed at that time. उस पर बहुत क्रिटिसिज्म हुआ, क्या हॉट मनी आ गया और ये हो गया और वो हो गया, लेकिन स्ट्रैटेजी यही थी. वो खुल के नहीं कह रहे थे कि हम क्यों कर रहे हैं, लेकिन वो एसेंशियली एक्सचेंज रेट को स्टेबलाइज करने के लिए और रिजर्व्स को स्टेबलाइज करने की स्ट्रैटेजी थी.
One good thing about Pakistan exiting COVID, I don't know if I should say that yet because कल जश्न आज़ादी की पिक्चर्स आज देख के सेकंड वेव का बहुत डर
भरा हुआ था कराची और हर जगह लोग निकले हैं.
तो उसको देख के one concern I have is that right now as a developing country we may witness investment, considering how we've managed to overcome COVID without actually doing anything substantial to counter it. Like I feel that okay, while the government lockdowns were effective, people aren't following SOPs. So you can't say okay, this is done because log follow kar rahe hain rules, things like that. And people aren't wearing masks unless they're going to a mall. मतलब informal sector में follow नहीं हो रहा है, right? So what I feel is that with time, if still we continue on this trajectory, we may witness investment from other countries. But like if we get a second wave, तो फिर Allah hi hafiz.
So I mean, मुझे नहीं लगता कि it's going to be as simple as that to your investment. There's a lot of other things wrong with the fundamentals of the economy and the way it functions and the structures. We can talk about that a bit more. But I wanted to first get your take on, so budget आया, budget disappointing था. Economy seems to be rebounding. Fertilizer is up, cement is up, stock market is not the economy, but it is also up. So confidence is there.
Capital letters.
So it's पहले तो ये बताओ कि for the person listening in, like, why is the stock market, particularly in Pakistan, not the economy? And then I'll ask you my deeper question.
All right. So think about it this way: if there are 100 people in Pakistan, all right, less than two of them are, two approximately, invest in the stock market. All right. I know they're rich, and I know multiplier effect hota hai because they generate, employment, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, it's not the economy. Considering how satta khilte hain log, I've seen a lot of shares that go up with zero fundamentals. They're not fundamentally driven. I've seen shell companies go up. I don't know. I don't know if I should take a name or something. But a few years ago, my stockbroker told my mom to invest in a power company, जो कई साल से बंद थी और मेरी अम्मा उस पे सट्टा खेल रही थी. Should I say? Can you cut that out?
I mean, she was playing satta. It's fine.
She wasn't playing satta. She doesn't know, right? So the broker
Yeah.
told her कि आप खरीदो. My mom bought it. He's like अब ₹2 बढ़ गया बाजी बेच दो. My mom sold it.
So I think that's an important point. Plus, I mean, 60-70%, depending on what estimates you use, of the Pakistani economy is informal.
Yeah.
और आपके 40% लोग लेबर जो है वो एग्रीकल्चर में काम करते हैं. तो वो तो fundamentals तो नहीं है. I agree with you. But my deeper question was this, before I lose my thought again. We saw up leading into the sort of chaos around COVID initially, lockdown karna hai, smart lockdown karna hai, nahi karna.
Before we move on, I just want to say one more thing about the stock market.
Yeah.
So the stock market, like Vakas from B Recorder once brilliantly said, okay, stock market is an indicator of the economy when it's good and you're in power, and it's not when it's good and you're not in power. So it depends आप government में हो या opposition में हो, आपका stance बदलता रहता है.
Yeah, BRT type scene है कि किसने BRT बनाई है और किस तरह बनाई है, उस हिसाब से जो है वो public transport अच्छी हो जाती है, गलत हो जाती है.
The economy is very political at the end of the day.
Yeah, and as it should be, everything's political, right? But so
कोई बोल सकता है वो apolitical है.
हाँ, so I mean, so you had this PTI government coming close to its second budget or third budget, right? Mini budgets अगर मिला के बात की जाए.
हाँ, ठीक है.
So you know, like depending on how you count the budgets, it's pretty crazy. But they were sort of looked like, at least the perception was that, a bit out of depth. Since then, the economy is recovering. BRT चल गया पेशावर में, IPPs के साथ deal हो गई. You know, Corona is downward trajectory, knock on wood, will stay the same way. Has the PTI finally gotten its act together, or what's your take being in Karachi on the ground? Because it is interesting. In the last 2 months, I have to say that something seems to have clicked somewhere, and I'm just trying to understand what that was.
The right answer, I feel, is maybe. Like, I feel that maybe when your heart's in the right place and you're not maybe not competent enough to do something, the world aligns together and makes it possible for you. I feel that, okay, so yeah, some policy is good. You can't say they're all bad, but yeah, I feel it's miracle. It's a miracle. There is some intervention going in, especially with COVID. All right. So if COVID आपका चलता रहेगा, economy will stay handicapped, right? So once you've got COVID under control, somehow everything goes back on track. As far as the IPPs are concerned, आप ही के लोग उसमें वो हैं और आप ही के लोग वही गवर्नमेंट में हैं, तो eventually वो मुक्का तो हो ही जाएगा. And as far as cement and fertilizer are concerned, fertilizer की sales would obviously stay up, because like you're an agrarian country at the end of the day, and corona
और अभी season भी आया है,
और corona इतना rural areas को impact नहीं किया है. All right. So that is one other thing. And वहाँ पे अगर impact आया भी है, considering how houses are far away, they're not as crammed as they are in the city, जहाँ पे 70 लोग जो हैं 120 गज के घर में रह रहे हैं. The rural areas are still pretty much safer than Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, वगैरह. Not Islamabad, but like, you get what I'm saying. So fertilizer sales उतनी थी. Cement की sales, obviously, considering how the real estate sector is supported by the government. The government is promoting it as much as it can.
And dam construction has started as well.
Yes. ये dam
बनाएंगे, तो वो डैम बनाना भी शुरू कर दिया. But even besides that, like, look, FATF के bills pass हो गए assembly से थोड़ी शोर शराबे के बाद. My view.
Go ahead. You would expect that the opposition would get some of their demands met, but I have no idea how they did it. They did it. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to the PTI government, but like, अच्छा चल रहा है for the past 1.5 months. Not as bad as it was. If they get inflation down, I'm pretty sure people will revive their confidence in them that they once had.
I think so. My theory on this is that a few weeks ago, when the Prime Minister came out, I think public remarks there, or it was widely reported in the media, I forget, whether these were private cabinet remarks or he made them publicly. But he had basically said, हमारे पास 6 महीने हैं और 6 महीने में परफॉर्मेंस ठीक करनी है. और वो बड़ा at that time लग रहा था कि अच्छा भाई वापसी वही बात कह रहे हैं. But I think there was a recognition within the cabinet that they need to start doing things, and all of a sudden, at least I saw.
Together.
Yeah, and the noise level came down, right? Yeah, वो noise थी, Shah Mahmood Qureshi का scene हुआ with FATF and then OIC. वो the regular typical Pakistani politics noise, right? But the hyper sort of opposition mode that the government had been and its ministers had been sort of toned down.
I feel that the government isn't concerned with the NAB cases as it was पहले.
हाँ, अब तो उनका चीफ मिनिस्टर खुद जा रहा है NAB की में वो response in it, right? So it was a shift. हाँ, वसीम अकरम, the Punjab वसीम अकरम, बुज़दार साहब. वो liquor license का कोई केस चल रहा है उनका. So, but I think that's what it was. Like the moment they decided or the orders came down from the top, start focusing on your job and stop being on the media and yelling all the time. At least not as at the high decibel level that they were. Things improved. That's my theory. But let's see. I mean, there's still a lot. I agree with you. Second wave hopefully doesn't come for COVID and they remain focused on the job at hand.
A friend of mine that works with the PTI government, doesn't work for the PTI government. He works independently with them. Like, you know how you collaborate, right? So he says that when Khan Saab was, told about COVID and how it's spreading, he could sense that, the guy was worried. Politics aside, everything aside, policies aside, at the end of the day, the guy wanted it to go away. His heart was in the right place. I just hope that, your wake-up call, COVID ke through jo bhi aayi or jo bhi hua hai, it actually continues. Like, again, knock on wood, for the past, you're right, like, they've realized, they've got to fix their act because aisa nahi chal sakega. Because at the end of the day, aap jitna bhi chori cheekte raho, people are eventually going to say, we like them better, at least they got their job done. Isse log kehte na khata hai to lagata bhi hai. It's eventually that narrative was regaining strength in Pakistan. And considering how agle saal, ek saal aur hai, for the next 2 years, all the policies that the government is going to make are going to be election centric. So these 3 years were really important for it because in the last 2 years of any government are election centric either way.
Yeah. I think the one weak point for them, and it should concern the government and everybody in Pakistan, is food inflation. Double-digit food inflation chali ja rahi hai, and that's bankrupting households. It's causing a whole set of issues that aren't covered in mainstream media. People don't talk about it.
At the end of the day, ek gareeb bande ko jiske bacche bhooke mar rahe hain, he doesn't care if your policy on Kashmir is perfect. Obviously, he is concerned about Kashmir, but he doesn't care if the foreign minister gives amazing speeches. He doesn't care if Imran Khan's image in the international media is brilliant. He doesn't care about anything. At the end of the day, he sees
उसका पेट नहीं भरना उससे तकरीर से.
उसको पाकिस्तान की तरक्की से, obviously Pakistan is your country, आपको थोड़ी है, लेकिन उसको इस सब चीजों से, he forgets everything after he sees his kids hungry. And we can't forget how a lot of people have been suffering because of inflation. They have, and you cannot deny that. If anyone in the government does deny that, they're wrong. And I feel that this needs to be talked about because people don't really talk about this, that even if your inflation rate falls, it's still not deflation. The rates, महंगाई कम नहीं हो रही है, महंगाई जिस तेजी से बढ़ रही है वो कम हो रहा है. So when the interest rates were 14% and when they dropped down to, let's say, 11%, हम लोग खुश हो रहे थे. So you still need to realize that prices are still increasing by 11%. So even though 14% in the US, so the difference between deflation, disinflation is something that people don't understand, and they're not supposed to understand. But as in, not everyone's supposed to understand this, but even 11%, 14 to 11% bhi aana, it's still a lot. Yeah. So we can't celebrate that.
And it's like agriculture. Like, I mean, you have to have a policy for your agricultural society. Like, if you cannot have a country where 40% of the workforce works in agriculture that's growing at 2% a year with flat yields, right? It's just, if your vision is to progress and grow your economy and grow the welfare, give welfare to your people, if your agriculture sector is not doing well, no matter what you do, आप जितने भी घर बना लो, कुछ नहीं होना, क्योंकि जो 40% बंदा काम कर रहा है एग्रीकल्चर में, उसकी ज़िंदगी अच्छी नहीं हो रही.
उसकी ज़िंदगी अच्छी नहीं हो रही. He's not getting enough money. The money goes to the big people up there. Other than that, eventually, if the agriculture sector does not improve, you're going to import food, things that you could make here. You're going to waste your precious foreign currency.
पाम ऑयल और लेंटल्स, मूंग की दाल और पाम ऑयल में कर चले जाता है. वो मुझे काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग लगता था. उससे याद आया, अगेन सॉरी टू कट यू ऑफ, बट लोग कह रहे थे इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन, हम चीज़ इंपोर्ट करते हैं, ये इंपोर्ट करते हैं, वो इंपोर्ट करते हैं. एंड आई वाज लाइक कि भाईजान वो तो छोटा सा है, मतलब हम तो पाम ऑयल और मूंग की दाल और काली दाल में ही जो है वो ज़्यादा पैसे निकाल देते हैं, और वो तो सब्स्टिट्यूट करना कोई इतना मुश्किल काम नहीं है.
Okay, so basically, I feel that a lot of people forget that our imports are very strongly linked to our growth rates. So unless we don't start making those things over here, we can't really substitute them. So you can't really substitute technology, machinery, equipment, because हम यहाँ नहीं बनाते. And without that technology, machinery, equipment, आपकी growth flatten होगी. So import substitution is something that's stupid. However, I still feel that our export policy needs to be relooked at. So a few days ago, I was interviewing the MD of the PMEX, which is another story. But he had one right. He had a very
for those who don't know, what's the PMEX?
The Pakistan Mercantile Exchange. So you can trade commodities there, futures mein and ready mein.
Which according to the Sugar Commission report is satta, by the way. So
it's kind of like the stock market.
Yeah.
So basically, उसमें ये है कि he said that we don't target the right markets. So for instance, our rice can be sold to countries like China, Japan, Korea. All right, and we sell our rice to countries in Africa. So for a moment, I thought he was being racist. But what he meant is, if you sell to a higher income country, you're more likely to get a better rate, which is something that Pakistan did not do. We don't focus towards countries that are better. We focus towards countries that just le lo hamara cheez. So that again is something that we need to revisit. Another thing that we need to revisit is our FTAs, जो हमारे free trade agreements हैं. उसमें ये देखना चाहिए हमें भी फायदा हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा. Are they buying from us? And if they're not, we've got to put a strict check on the commercial attaches we have in different countries. Like, वो अपना क्या काम कर रहे हैं? They're this is something that a fellow an economist, Maha, was talking to me about, and she was like, "Listen, commercial attaches, they take salaries, they live off government perks. वो कर क्या रहे हैं?" And it is true. Like, we've got commercial attaches in so many countries, and how many of those are actually bringing in business for Pakistan? Very few. And the ones that do, वो Twitter पे लगाते हैं, and you can see that they're doing something. But the ones that don't, you know.
Plus market access ऐसे बैठे बैठे तो नहीं आता ना आपने उसके लिए. And I agree with that point. Even outside of rice, for example, अगर आप जापान, कोरिया को बेच रहे हैं या यूरोपियन यूनियन में बेच रहे हैं या यूएस या कनाडा में बेच रहे हैं, तो आपके एक्सपोर्ट्स के पास अपॉर्चुनिटी भी है फॉर ब्रांडिंग, मार्केटिंग, वैल्यू एडिशन, जो कि फ्रैंकली लेस डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज वेदर देन अफ्रीका और ईस्ट एशिया व्हेरेवर will not be there, क्योंकि वो तो कमोडिटी परचेसर्स हैं, उन्होंने बल्क में लेना है आपसे, तो आप वैल्यू ऐड तो कट ही कर देना वहाँ से. प्लस दूसरी चीज़, अगेन एक्सपोर्ट की पॉलिसी, हम कॉटन, पाकिस्तान जो है वो कॉटन इंपोर्ट करता है, which is super interesting and weird, because अगर आपका बेसिक एक्सपोर्ट टेक्सटाइल्स है, तो वर्टिकली इंटीग्रेट आपने इस तरह क्यों नहीं किया कि आप अपनी कॉटन खुद ही उगाएं और वहाँ ही जहाँ उगती है वहाँ ही उसकी जिनिंग हो और प्रोसेस हो जाए.
I remember when I was a kid, any foreign brand, जिसका tag उठाओ उस पे लिखा होता made in Pakistan clothes, right? Made in Pakistan. Then later on, कुछ पे made in China, and now anything that you pick up, it's made in Bangladesh. And we've really been eliminated from the international market, and that's because obviously when you import cotton, फिर आप खुद बनाओगे, costs are up. All right, we could have, I don't know, I'm assuming, it may be wrong, but if we were, making our own cotton, if we were growing our own cotton, I think we would have better competitive advantage than,
Yeah, plus, I mean, how there's this weird obsession in Pakistan with the strong currency. What's your take on that? Like, why are people, a lot of elites in Pakistan, obsessed with the dollar? जो है वो रुपया जो है वो मजबूत होना चाहिए डॉलर के मुकाबले में.
Her government ki ego has been tied with the rates at which the dollar has been and petrol prices. And we need to understand that these two things are not tied to your ego. Petrol महंगा होना is not bad. It's not bad. दुनिया भर में पेट्रोल महंगा रखा जाता है. But then again, considering how हमारी inflation ही इतनी tied to it है, we keep it high. I keep it low. I get that. As far as the currency is concerned, I feel that even with devaluation, all right, I won't call this depreciation because it's not depreciation, it's devaluation. Even with devaluation, we won't see a very vast change in our exports, all right? But at the same time, I don't feel that we should artificially keep our exchange rate at a certain level. It's costing us. We keep borrowing to keep it at that level. It's beyond stupid what how you tie the currency rate. Like dollar मेरे ज़माने में इतना था भाई, आपके ज़माने में fundamentals भी different थे, reserves अलग थे, ये अलग था, everything was different. So considering all of these things, I think that this mentality needs to set aside. But that is also one reason behind this is also because sorry. One reason behind this is also because a lot of our people don't really understand these things. Because आप जो है ना रात के 7 से 10 बजे तक you're going to put on people in a talk show and they're going to like इनकी हुकूमत में डॉलर ये गया, इनकी हुकूमत में पेट्रोल इतना महंगा हो गया. When people are going to do this, it changes the narrative. And I feel like our talk shows are not responsible enough. This is something that you don't really see in other places around the world. You don't see people criticizing the government that dollar weak ho raha hai, in the US as often as you see it done in Pakistan. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying in Pakistan mein, this is a political point scoring moment. Just say, for example, I love this example. It's of Ehsan Iqbal, who जब WTI की prices crash हुई थी, Ehsan Iqbal was like, oh, अब हुकूमत पेट्रोल कब सस्ता कर रही है? अब Ehsan Iqbal, a Wharton graduate, educated, I look up to the guy, and he says that, and I'm like, आपको पता है ये WTI और ये पाकिस्तान नहीं आता है, and it's not the same as Arab Light that we get, and it's different, and ये अभी ready की वजह से the contracts were expiring इसलिए ये हुआ है. You know this stuff. Why are you misleading the public? अब आपके सारे वोटर्स बोलेंगे देखो पेट्रोल एक बिरयानी की प्लेट से सस्ता हो गया, लेकिन इमरान खान जो है ना उसने आवाम को बुरा किया हुआ है. और फिर conversely इमरान खान he reduced the petrol prices and said हमने आवाम के लिए किया है, but he didn't do it. They didn't have the space to keep the petrol prices at that level.
The duty was capped constitutionally at 30 rupees a liter.
The levy was 30, 17% GST. आपका interfreight equalization margin आ गया, आपके OMCs and dealership margins आ गए, सारे margins आ गए. He had to cut it by 7 rupees. उसने कोई कमाल नहीं किया, लेकिन they played it as a favor to you guys as well. Cheapest in the region.
और फिर बाद में महंगा करना पड़ा 1 महीने बाद, तो वही कमेंट्स रिपीट हो रहे थे ना. फिर 30 दिन पहले आपने क्या कहा था और अब आप क्या कहते हैं.
अच्छा, मजे की बात है, पहले आपने लेवी ऊपर रखा. I love that fact कि आपने लेवी ऊपर रखा. I'm not going to criticize you कि आपने लेवी ऊपर रखा, because you need money when you're giving people out 12,000 COVID के time पे, right? And you need it for fiscal stimulus. But at the same time, जब एकदम से you increased it, you could have increased it gradually. लेवी को थोड़ा control करके. That is something I feel. I feel like one problem with this government has always been that they create jerks. So things that were to be done in a slow manner were done fast. Just like currency devaluation, jo hui hai, it happened like SL when PTI came into government, right? A lot of the things that they did, it just went like seconds, right? You're supposed to track it through time.
And it's also, that's a very important point, because it's also driven by an issue with indecision, right? कि आपने जब आप आए power में, everyone knew before the elections whoever comes to power will go back to the IMF. You took 6 months, that built up the pressure, which meant that the jerk that you're describing had to happen, because आपने एक पॉलिसी जो आपने आराम से रोल आउट करनी थी, उसके कम्युनिकेशंस बेनिफिट्स भी थे अगर आप आते के साथ ही कह देते कि हम जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि हमारी गलती तो नहीं है ना.
Politically as well, it would have been a really smart move कि देखें उन लोगों ने इतना बुरा हाल किया, हमें जाना पड़ रहा है, हम क्या करें. But the 6 months they took, that actually ruined business sentiment a lot. उस टाइम पे mass layoffs भी बहुत हुए थे. That is because people didn't know कि अब होगा क्या, because there was no clear communication. अब असद उमर still says कि नहीं मेरे पास बहुत अच्छा आइडिया था लेकिन हमने किया नहीं. असद उमर प्लीज हमें बता दें वो आइडिया क्या था. I really want to know. I'm not trolling him. I'm actually curious to know
Well,
what the idea.
I'll tell you what the idea was. You can
Okay.
go read it. It's available at Liberty Books. It's a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That was his idea. And I'm not trolling him, by the way. You can go on YouTube, just put in a date filter and Google
That's the
his.
first book I read when I thought मैं लोगों को दिखाऊं मैं economics पढ़ती हूँ.
हाँ, तो वो जो है उन्होंने ये किताब
फ्लाइट से पहले
pre-election.
मैंने खरीदा था so that
Yeah.
I फ्लाइट में जो है ना
You should know, right? It's a signaling कि आप जरा woke हैं और आपको पता है कि economic hitman किस तरह पाकिस्तान की economy को खोखला कर रहे हैं. But I mean, on a very serious note, if you put in his interviews from pre-election era, like 6 months, 8 months before the elections, that was the book he always talked about. Every single discussion he had about what is he going to do with the economy started with, आपने ये book पढ़ी है, Economics, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And for me, that was a huge red flag. And I mean, I don't know Asad Omar. Seems like a smart guy, qualified, has obviously worked at one of the largest, headed one of the largest conglomerates. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was hosting the IDA convocation and his brother Mohammed Zubair was there. और मैंने जो है ना उनकी PA से पूछा असद उमर घर आते हैं क्या? And I was like, can I call him Zubair Umar? And he's like, do you want to, get kicked out of here? And फिर मैं इंसान बन गई. I was like, अब मुझे serious होना है. तो ये trolling की nature जो है ना मेरी वो in person भी है. आप सिर्फ Twitter के हद तक ना समझें.
नहीं, okay. चलें, you have the qualities on that. अच्छा, trolling और उससे याद आया, you initially had mentioned suffering. तो you live in Karachi, बारिशें हुई हैं, अभी फिर बारिश हो रही है, के इलेक्ट्रिक जिंदाबाद, और अब सुनने को आ रहा है कि कराची का कोई स्पेशल प्लान आने वाला है on the horizon. So as a Karachiite, what's your take on living in that city?
देखें, मेरे इलाके में बारिश नहीं हुई है. मैं आपको अपने इलाके मतलब मेरे इलाके में बारिश हुई लेकिन रोड साफ है. So I'm going to tell you that there is no problem. I'm not going to do that. I don't work at I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to tell you is that yes, the rain was terrible. Houses were flooded. अच्छे खासे अमीर लोगों के घरों के अंदर तक पानी आया है. ये हाल है. Roads खराब and it was terrible. One good thing throughout all this is that पिछले साल भी ईद वाले दिन it rained, right? But people didn't care. And उन्होंने अपने गाय बकरे.
I was there. Yeah, it was horrible.
It was rivers of red blood. This year they controlled that, and that didn't happen. Specific areas.
Also, this year was Corona, right? So people were ज़्यादा खुद ही अपनी जान की फिक्र कर रहे थे थोड़ी बहुत.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say here is that it was actually terrible. For someone that's been stuck on Shire Festival for 3 to 4 hours, आप उससे पूछो. For someone जिसके घर के अंदर पानी आ गया, जिसकी चीजें खराब हो गई हैं, उससे आप पूछो. For someone that's lost, stuff at home, खराब पूरा हो गया है. For people that have been stranded at home, I still can't get the images out of those kids that were stuck in a school in Orangi and they were crying. That is something that I don't think I can forgive anyone for. So these are all.
And people die, yeah. Speaking of last year, like I remember it happened. I was there, right? So I was sort of talking to a few friends, and I live in my family lives in Clifton, and there were these two guys going out on a bike ride to get something. खयाबान शहबाज पे और electrocute हो गए यार. मतलब imagine.
And that image on Twitter, I swear to God, this year Eid pe, like after the rain, I was like, Mama, उन लोगों के ईद से एक दिन पहले those two boys, the brothers, they got electrocuted. एक को दूसरे को बचाते हुए. And I remember उस time पे I had a fight with someone on Twitter जिसके अब्बा के electric में he was supply side पे ना, and what I remember, he's like, "Oh, my dad does his job. Stop criticizing K Electra." I was like, "Dude, you do know that your dad complicitly is involved and is behind the murder. If he's not doing a good job, he is behind it." And we don't. I'm actually happy that the courts have said that, any electrocution case, usme K Electric is a criminal
Yeah, they
law.
have liability. They
They
should
are
be
issues.
sued for that stuff. Yeah.
They should be sued. And to be very honest, I hope Allah na kare kisi ko sue karne ka mauka bhi ho, but it is beyond crazy how many people die because of the rain in Pakistan. Like every time it rains, आप 5 मिनट के लिए आप खुश होते हो, then you think, oh my god, no, लोगों के घर में लाइट जाएगी, हमारे इलाके में तो आ जाएगी, लेकिन लोगों के घर में 12-12 घंटे तक लाइट नहीं आएगी. And then after that, you think about how many people have been electrocuted, how many people lost their life savings. When you think about all that, it actually puts perspective in that all is not well. And the fact that Said Ghani अपनी गाड़ी निकाल के रोड पे घूम के आपको उन स्पेसिफिक एरियाज को दिखाते हैं जहाँ पे बारिश नहीं हो रही, तो उस तरह से मैं भी अपने इलाके की दिखा
अच्छा,
दूँ.
उसका पता है, एक लास्ट ईयर बहुत फनी सीन हुआ था. आई डोंट नो इफ आई ट्वीटेड अबाउट दिस और नॉट, बट आई वाज गोइंग विद माय फादर. यही बकरा ईद के टाइम पे जब बारिशें हुई थी, तो हम जा रहे थे बंस रोड कुछ लेने. तो वी क्रॉस क्या कहते हैं, वी क्रॉस गवर्नर हाउस एंड वी आर गोइंग डाउन द रोड. एंड माय डैड सेज कि ये अभी वीडियो आई है सईद गनी की ना, ही शोज इट टू मी एंड इट्स ऑन द अदर साइड ऑफ द गवर्नर हाउस, वहाँ पानी नहीं है. And literally, like, this was just sent out on WhatsApp. और हम दूसरी साइड पे गाड़ी चला रहे हैं और वहाँ 4 फुट ऊंचा पानी है. Literally, like, our car has having some water come into it, and we were just laughing. We were just like, अब ये वीडियो मीडिया पे चलेगी, लोग कहेंगे कि देखो वहाँ सब साफ है, बिल्कुल जबरदस्त परफॉर्मेंस, और हम दूसरी तरफ, उसी सड़क की दूसरी तरफ चल रहे हैं और वहाँ जो है वो 4 फुट पानी है. But it's narratives, right? Going back to your point.
It's narratives, and the point is that I find that whatever you do, at least don't hide the suffering of people. So one thing that I'm going to credit the PTI government for right now is they don't say कि महंगाई नहीं है. All right, they don't say महंगाई नहीं है. They don't say कि लोग बेरोजगार या लोग मर नहीं रहे. I haven't come across that. They don't deny. They don't talk about it. That's another thing, but they don't deny it. But like the Sindh government, आपको वो कर देगा. There's a word. They gaslight you. Sindh government basically gaslights you, and they go like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong. There's something wrong, really?"
Sticking to the Karachi topic, like, what is the? I mean, I always notice this. Go ahead.
Karachi package पे जो बात हुई थी. So Karachi package, considering how Karachi वालों ने vote दे के PTI को government लाया, a lot of people did expect something for Karachi. They expected a lot for Karachi, not even a little. That is something that is missing. So unless the PTI
यार वो तो पैसे ही नहीं है, PSDP के लिए पैसे नहीं है, तो कराची कहाँ से आएगा पैकेज?
मुझे ये बात समझ नहीं आई. सिंध गवर्नमेंट के पास कराची के लिए पैसे नहीं है, मेयर के पास कराची के लिए पैसे नहीं है.
नहीं, उनके पास इख्तियारात नहीं है. आप सुना कि कहते हैं इख्तियार ही नहीं है ना.
इख्तियार भी नहीं है, पैसे भी नहीं है. और फिर अली जैदी निकलते हैं रोड पे और बोलते हैं मैं पैसे जमा करूंगा लोगों से और फिर आपकी खिदमत करूंगा, और उसकी शर्ट्स बन के बैठी हुई हैं. They haven't been used yet. वो हमें ट्रोल कर रहे हैं.
हाँ, और एक सीजन आता है ना, every year people cover Karachi and they talk about what's wrong with the city and we need to do something. And I think it was the digital spokesperson for the Punjab CM who responded to me on Twitter when I was talking about Karachi a few days ago about the trash collection. And he was like, I was like, if you have a plan for waste management, I would appreciate seeing that, because just cleaning the nalas is not going to solve the problem. And he was like, here is the plan. Here is the plan from Arif Alvi before the elections in 2018. And I was like, okay, here's the story about it, where he said everything can be done in 2 to 3 years. I was like, can you give me a status update on where we are with the progress on this plan? Because I would love a status update in terms of how much progress we've made, given the now president said 2 से 3 साल में काम हो जाएगा. No response.
Okay, before I move on to the main point, I just want to remind you that Arif Alvi apparently now has another son.
Yeah. and you were being funny about it on social media as well.
I'm funny about everything.
That's true.
It depends whether you find it funny or not.
And you have to be. I think you have to be funny at that. That was actually pretty funny. For a moment, I remember I thought he was actually his son because I just glanced at it, and then you were like, "Nahi, ye alag banda hai."
And when I'm tweeting, I'm like, that's literally what I am like. Okay. But what I'm trying to say is, yeah, waste management के हिसाब से, yes, the government does not really have a policy towards waste management. And also एक और बात ये भी civic sense नहीं है. So while we blame the government, we've also got like आप खुद कचरा फेंक रहे हो, पता नहीं ये हुकूमत इतनी गंदगी क्यों बर्दाश्त करती है. आप खुद गंदगी हो साहब, आप खुद गंदगी हो. आप खुद गाड़ी से कचरा फेंकते हो और फिर बोलते हो हाँ रोड कितने गंदे हैं. आप खुद गंदगी हो.
आज किसी ने I saw a picture of the BRT after its opening. They had a picture of the toilet के इतना कचरा पड़ा है. Whereas KP के government and I was like यार वो हर बाथरूम में अगर लोग कचरा फेंकने लग जाएंगे तो BRT वाले क्या रोज हर 1 घंटे बाद झाड़ू लगाएंगे उस बाथरूम के अंदर. That just can't happen.
I feel, okay, so I saw videos where a lot of people rushed to the BRT trains as well, so buses, and like बहुत सारे लोग आ गए थे, right? And then I also felt like, you know, happy कि देखो कितने लोग excited हैं उसके लिए. But yeah, like उसका कचरे की जो आप बात कर रहे हो, the government cannot provide civic sense. And there's a limit to what it can do. It can clean, लेकिन अगले दिन दोबारा कचरा आ जाएगा. Then it'll clean, then अगले दिन दोबारा आ जाएगा. So again, you need to, you know, establish a system for this. I remember Karachi, I guess 2 years ago, they came up with like these trash cans. These yellow plastic trash cans जो
Sea-View वाले याद हैं? Sea-View में जो लगाए थे.
नहीं, वो जो trash से art
crazy shapes, या जिसमें लोगों ने तस्वीरें लेना शुरू कर दी थी.
यार क्या करें, हमारे पास चीजें नहीं है, क्या करें? हम aesthetic.
No, but it was also very poorly designed trash can. Like, how are you going to take out trash from that was a question I had. But I think then they removed it.
So like,
but someone made a lot of money for these.
Of course. So someone in so in our area and other areas, what they did is that they put like these plastic trash cans, and उन लोगों ने अब हमारे यहाँ informally कोई और बंदा आके trash उठाता है. I don't really know the system, but someone else picks it up. So the government was like, no, आप उसको मत दिया करें, आप हमारे trash cans में डाला करें और हमारे waste management system है. But I don't see that in practice anymore. Now they're not enforcing it. वही बंदा दोबारा आता है. और फिर हमने भी हमारे बिल्डिंग वालों ने भी एक वर्क अराउंड निकाल दिया था. What they did is that they said, oh ठीक है, तुम थोड़ा सा कचरा उसमें डाल दिया करो ताकि लगे कि हम लोग उसमें करते हैं, लेकिन बाकी तुम ले जाया करो. So you know, you can't blame the government, any government, चाहे वो PDP हो, वो कोई भी हो. You can't blame them, but you can blame them for the fact कि वो नाले की सफाई का इंतजार तब करते हैं जब शहर डूब जाता है. That is something that you can blame them for. But you can't blame them for कि नाला गंदा क्यों होता है. नाला गंदा.
But I think you can also still blame them for not devising and developing an effective local government system,
it's
right?
High time. It's high time. It's something that we've needed for a long time. It's been highlighted for long enough. And if they still aren't, that just means that they don't give a shit. They don't care.
Well, you know, we're running out of time and you're getting a bit angry, but last question from you.
Karachi wali, like,
Emotion aa jati hai zyada. What's the prediction next 3 to 6 months? Where does the honeymoon continue? Does the PTI continue to make silent and steady progress in terms of getting its act together? Or do you see that this is just an outlier event and we're going to be back to normal pretty soon in terms of the way the government is performing?
I hope and pray for the sake of Pakistan that we continue on the trajectory that we are. And I have a feeling that rahega, because at the end of the day, the economy again is political. So if you don't perform, you won't get re-elected. And people are tired. They are annoyed. And that is what matters right now. And the government has realized that कि अगली बारी बहुत मुश्किल है unless they get their act together within the next 6 months. So I think I don't know. Maybe
वसीम अकरम टीम में रहेंगे कि नहीं?
I hope not. No.
6 months.
I just hope he becomes Wasim Akram.
Okay.
सही अब वो अभी
चलें
आजकल आजकल वो जो है ना वो है अब नहीं मैं I'm not gonna say it रहने दो अभी आजकल वो वसीम अकरम नहीं है
चलें देखते हैं. Well, those are the predictions, and Ariba, thanks for joining. This was a great discussion for everyone
Okay.
tuning in.
The lizard is
Follow
still
Ariba.
there. I'm just ignoring it.
She's been ignoring a lizard that's in the corner, but if you don't follow her on social media, do, because it is a funny account at times, and it covers the
कभी
economy in a
कभार
funny way.
कभी कभार लेम भी हो जाता है just a
Yeah, but
disclaimer.
don't troll. That's a bad thing. Unequivocally condemn it, which people have been struggling to condemn trolling unequivocally these past few days. So
Being funny and trolling are two different things. When you're getting personal and when you're making mean remarks on how someone looks, how someone talks, that is where you draw the line. बाकी कर लो जो करना है.
all right. On that note, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next
Thank
week.
you.
Thank you, Ariba.